First contact. The Galactic Armor Testing Facility stood as a testament to both technological achievement and humanity's perpetual preparation for war. Captain Maya Rodriguez watched through reinforced glass as the latest prototype underwent stress testing. The experimental suit was beautiful in its own way, sleek curves of matte black metal designed to amplify human strength while maintaining maximum mobility. Final calibration complete, announced Technical Officer Chen through the observation room speakers. Ready for live test. Maya nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the suit. This was the culmination of 5 years of research and development, Project Aegis, humanity's answer to the growing nano-plague that threatened to consume the galaxy. The Stellar Union had tasked her team with creating the next generation of combat armor, something that could give their Marines a fighting chance against the horrors that awaited them on infected worlds. Beginning power-up sequence, Chen continued, his fingers dancing across his control panel. The suit's external ports began to glow with a soft blue light as its fusion core came online. That's when everything went wrong. The facility's emergency sirens began to wail. Red warning lights bathed the observation room in a crimson glow. Maya's wrist computer chirped urgently, a priority message from Stellar Union Command. Multiple N-class vessels detected entering the Arcturus system, the automated message announced. This is not a drill. All military personnel report to battle stations. Civilian population to proceed to designated shelter areas immediately. Maya's blood ran cold. N-class vessels meant only one thing: the nano-plague had found them. She'd read the reports, seen the footage of what happened when those ships made planetfall. Entire worlds reduced to shambling hordes of cyber-zombies within days. Chen, shut down the test, she barked. We need to dash. The observation room's reinforced windows suddenly exploded inward as something massive struck the facility. Maya was thrown to the ground, her ears ringing from the impact. Through the settling dust and debris, she could see flames rising from the city beyond the facility's perimeter. They were already here. Maya scrambled to her feet, ignoring the cuts and bruises from the blast. The prototype suit stood undamaged in its testing chamber, its blue light still pulsing steadily. Chen. Status. No response came from her technical officer. Maya spotted him slumped over his console, a nasty gash visible on his forehead. She needed to get him medical attention, but first. Maya's gaze returned to the prototype suit. It wasn't fully tested. The neural interface could fry her brain. The power systems might overload. But with N-class vessels in orbit and drop pods already hitting the surface, they were out of options. She reached for the emergency release on the testing chamber door. The Stellar Union needed heroes right now, but they were going to have to settle for whatever she could become. 12 hours later, Maya stood atop a pile of twisted metal and broken synthetic flesh that had once been nano-infected civilians. The prototype suit had performed beyond expectations, its enhanced strength and integrated weapon systems proving devastatingly effective against the first wave of infected. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Captain Rodriguez. The voice came through her suit's comm system. This is Sergeant Boyd of the 7th Marine Expeditionary Unit. We've got survivors trapped in the Central District. Could use some help here. Maya checked her suit's power levels, 47% and holding steady. The neural interface was causing a slight headache, but nothing she couldn't handle. She toggled her comm, copy that, Sergeant. Send me coordinates. I'm on my way. As she launched herself into the burning sky using the suit's jump jets, Maya couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of first contact with alien life. Now that contact had finally come, it wasn't peaceful explorers or wise teachers from the stars. Instead, the galaxy had given them monsters. And to fight monsters, humanity had chosen to become something just as terrifying. Maya spotted Boyd's position marker on her HUD, a small group of Marines holding position outside what appeared to be some kind of alien temple. As she descended, her suit's sensors detected multiple approaching hostile signatures. The second wave was coming. "Sergeant Boyd," she transmitted, "be advised you have multiple tangos incoming from the north and east. I count at least 50 shamblers and..." She paused as her sensors highlighted a particularly large signature moving at high speed, at least one Alpha class. "Copy that, Captain," Boyd replied. "We've got civilians inside. Mostly locals, some kind of alien species called the Wxin. They're scared out of their minds, and I can't blame them. Their whole world just ended and now they're watching humans in powered armor blow away their zombified neighbors." Maya landed with a heavy thud next to Boyd's position, the prototype suit's impact absorbers cushioning what would have otherwise been a bone-crushing fall. She got her first good look at the Wxin through the temple's broken doors, humanoid aliens with pale green skin and vibrant blue hair. They were huddled together, watching the humans with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Sergeant," Maya said, her suit's external speakers allowing the Marines to hear her clearly, "I've got about 6 hours of power left in this prototype. Let's make them count. We're going to show these people that humanity isn't just another monster in the dark. We're the ones who fight the monsters." Boyd nodded, then turned to his squad. "You heard the captain. Form up. We hold this position no matter what comes at us." The first shambler appeared around the corner, its once green skin now a mottled gray, nanotech fibers visibly threading through its exposed flesh. Behind it came dozens more, their moans echoing off the empty buildings. Maya's suit hummed as its weapon systems came online. The prototype wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, and it definitely wasn't what the galaxy had asked for. But it was exactly what the galaxy needed. "Marines," she called out. "Let's show these civilians why humanity is the species you want on your side when the monsters come." The night erupted in plasma fire and thunder as humanity made its stand against the darkness. The price of survival. The temple's marble floors were stained with hydraulic fluid and synthetic gore as Maya's prototype suit finally gave out. She managed to manually disengage the neural interface before the power failure could cause feedback damage to her brain, but removing the armor proved more challenging. The emergency release mechanisms had fused during the 12-hour battle. "Hold still, Captain," Sergeant Boyd said as he worked on the suit's chest plate with a plasma torch. "Almost got it." Maya tried not to think about how vulnerable she felt without power to the armor systems. The suit that had turned her into a one-woman army was now just dead weight. Through gaps in the temple's broken walls, she could see the first rays of dawn painting the sky in shades of purple and green, this world's alien sunrise a reminder of just how far from home they all were. "There," Boyd announced as the chest plate finally came free. "Rest should be easier now." As the Marines helped Maya out of the remaining armor pieces, she observed their temporary sanctuary. The temple's high ceiling and reinforced walls had proven defensible, but it wouldn't last forever. Already she could hear the distant moans of more infected gathering in the streets outside. The Wxin survivors watched the humans work with a mixture of fascination and terror. One of them, the one called Zulia, seemed to have appointed herself as their spokesperson. She approached Maya cautiously once the last piece of armor had been removed. "Your metal skin," Zulia said in surprisingly good English, "thanks to the universal translators, it protected you from the infection." Maya nodded, stretching muscles that felt like they'd been put through a meat grinder. "The suit's hermetically sealed and has multiple layers of nano-resistant shielding. Standard procedure when fighting plague vectors." "But now it's broken," Zulia observed. "Does that mean you'll become like them?" "No," Maya assured her. "The nanophage needs living tissue to replicate. As long as we avoid direct contact with infected blood or other fluids, we're safe." She paused, considering their situation. "Well, relatively safe." Boyd's squad had set up defensive positions around the temple's perimeter, but they were running low on power cells for their weapons. The modified plasma rifles they carried were effective against the nanophage synthetic enhancement of infected tissue, but they burned through ammunition quickly. "Captain," Boyd called out, "you're gonna want to see this." Maya followed the sergeant to where one of his Marines had set up a portable scanning array. The holographic display showed multiple red dots converging on their position from all directions. "Those aren't just shamblers," Boyd said grimly. "Movement patterns suggest at least 3 Alpha-class infected leading them. And this." He pointed to a larger signature moving at incredible speed through the city's underground infrastructure. "This is something new." Maya studied the readout, her heart sinking. "How long until they reach us?" 2 hours, maybe less. Boyd checked his weapon's charge indicator. "We've got maybe enough ammunition for one more major engagement, but after that." Maya turned to look at the Wxin survivors. There were 37 of them now, including children. They had no weapons, no training, and nowhere else to go. The nanophage had already claimed most of their world. These might be among the last free members of their species. "What about orbital support?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. Boyd shook his head. Stellar Union fleet is still engaged with N-class vessels in high orbit. They can't risk dropping reinforcements while those ships are still up there. We're on our own. A small commotion near the temple's altar drew their attention. One of the Wxin children had found a hidden panel in the floor, some kind of underground passage. "The sacred ways," Zulia explained when Maya and Boyd approached. "They connect all the major temples in the city. Our ancestors built them centuries ago." Maya exchanged looks with Boyd. "How well do you know these tunnels?" "I served as a temple guardian for 5 years, Zulia replied. "I know every path, every junction." She hesitated. "But the tunnels weren't built to withstand things like this. If the infection has spread below ground, we'll deal with that if we have to," Maya decided. "Right now, those tunnels are our best chance at getting these people to safety." She turned to Boyd. "What's the nearest military installation?" Boyd consulted his tactical display. "Forward Operating Base Echo. About 20 kilometers southeast. They've got a defensive perimeter and anti-orbital weapons. If anywhere on this rock is still secure, that's it." 20 kilometers underground, Maya mused. Through tunnels that might be infested with nano-zombies, while being hunted by at least 3 alphas and whatever that new signature is. She managed a grim smile. "Just another day at the office for the Stellar Union Marines, right?" Boyd barked a laugh. "Hurrah, Captain. Though I gotta say, this is a new one even for us." Maya spent the next hour helping the Marines prepare for their underground journey. They distributed what supplies they had, rigged the remaining power cells from her prototype suit into improvised explosives, and did their best to explain to the Wxin survivors what they might face in the tunnels. "Remember," she told them, "if someone gets infected, there's nothing we can do. The nanophage works too fast for any treatment we have. If it happens, don't hesitate. Don't let them turn. It's the kindest thing you can do for them now." The Wxin didn't seem to fully grasp the implications of her words, but they nodded anyway. Their world had ended, they were past the point of arguing about harsh realities. As they prepared to descend into the tunnels, Maya caught Boyd giving her an odd look. "Something on your mind, Sergeant?" "Just thinking," he replied. "When we signed up to fight the nanophage, they told us we'd be humanity's last line of defense. Nobody mentioned anything about playing hero to a bunch of aliens we just met. Would it have changed your mind if they had?" Boyd checked his weapon one last time and shook his head. "Nah. Truth is, Captain, I think this is exactly why humanity needs to be out here. Universe is full of horrors like the nanophage. Somebody's got to be willing to stand against them, even when it's not our fight." Maya was about to respond when her portable scanner began beeping urgently. The large signature they detected earlier was moving faster now, and it was headed straight for the temple. Everyone into the tunnels, she ordered. Now. They barely got the last civilian through the hidden door before something massive slammed into the temple's outer wall. The impact shook the entire structure, sending ancient stonework crashing down around them. Through the dust and debris, Maya caught a glimpse of their pursuer, a horrific amalgamation of synthetic and organic material, easily 3 times the size of a normal Wxin. Its body rippled with nanomachine activity, and its eyes were fully aware. Omega class, Boyd breathed. First one I've ever seen. Maya slammed the tunnel entrance shut and activated the explosives they'd rigged around it. Let's make sure it's the last one any of us see. Move. The charges detonated, collapsing the tunnel entrance behind them as they plunged into the darkness beneath the city. The hunt was on, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just entered something far worse than a simple escape route. These sacred tunnels were about to become their tomb or their salvation, and she wasn't sure which would be more merciful. Sacred depths. The sacred tunnels beneath New Java City were never meant to harbor the living. Maya realized this as their group moved through the cramped passages, their way lit only by the Marines' tactical lights and the bioluminescent fungi that clung to the ancient walls. The air was thick with the musty scent of centuries, and their footsteps echoed ominously through the darkness. These markings, technical specialist Cooper whispered, running her gloved hand along strange symbols etched into the stone. They're not just decorative. They're carrying power. Maya paused to examine the walls more closely. True enough, a faint blue energy pulsed through the carved symbols, creating patterns that seemed to respond to their presence. The Wxin had been more technologically advanced than initial reports suggested. Zulia noticed their interest. The sacred ways are alive, she explained. They remember those who walk them, guide those who are worthy. She touched one of the glowing symbols, and the light intensified briefly. But something is wrong. The patterns are afraid. Boyd signaled for the group to halt as they approached a junction. Movement ahead, he reported, checking his motion tracker. Multiple contacts, moving erratically. Infected? Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. Has to be. Nothing else moves like that. Boyd switched to thermal imaging. Temperature signatures are all wrong too. Whatever's down here, it's not alive. Not anymore. Maya surveyed their group. The 37 Wxin civilians were holding up better than expected, but fear and exhaustion were taking their toll. They'd been moving for hours through these tunnels, and they still had at least 15 kilometers to go before reaching FOB Echo. Options? She asked Boyd. The sergeant consulted his tactical display. Main tunnel ahead is compromised. Got 2 alternate routes, one goes deeper, following some kind of maintenance shaft. Other one rises closer to the surface, through what looks like an old temple complex. The Hall of Remembrance, Zulia interjected. It was sealed centuries ago, after the Great Schism. None have entered it since. Any particular reason why? Maya asked. Zulia's expression darkened. The stories say it houses weapons. Terrible ones, from before my people embraced peace. It was sealed to prevent them from ever being used again. Maya was about to respond and a bone-chilling shriek echoed through the tunnels. It wasn't the mindless moan of a shambler or the predatory howl of an alpha. This was something else, something that spoke of intelligence and malice. The Omega, Boyd breathed. It found a way down. How? Cooper demanded. We collapsed the entrance. Doesn't matter, Maya cut in. We need to move. Now. She turned to Zulia. These weapons in the Hall of Remembrance, any chance they still work? You can't be serious, Zulia protested. Those weapons were forbidden for a reason. They corrupt those who use them. They dash. Another shriek, closer this time. The sound was followed by the distinctive chittering of nanomachines rebuilding organic matter. With all due respect to your traditions, Maya said firmly, we're running out of options. That thing up there? It's going to catch us eventually. When it does, it won't just kill your people, it will turn them into weapons for spreading the nanophage across the galaxy. Zulia stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Hall of Remembrance, she decided. But you must swear to destroy whatever we find there once we're done. Some things should remain buried. They diverted their course upward, following Zulia's guidance through increasingly ornate passages. The glowing symbols grew more numerous and complex, their light taking on a reddish tinge that Maya found unsettling. The tunnel eventually opened into a vast chamber that took Maya's breath away. The Hall of Remembrance was enormous, its ceiling lost in darkness above them. Rows of metallic pods lined the walls, each bearing more of those strange symbols. But these weren't glowing with peaceful blue light, they pulsed with angry red energy that cast threatening shadows across the ancient space. Holy shit, Cooper whispered, her scanner going wild. Captain, these readings, these pods aren't just weapons. They're some kind of biomechanical combat suits. Like your prototype, but way more advanced. And way more dangerous, Zulia added grimly. They were bonded directly to their users' nervous systems. The interface drove most of them insane. Those who survived became something else. Neither fully wind nor fully machine. Maya approached one of the pods, wiping centuries of dust from its surface. Inside, she could make out the vague shape of what might have been armor, but it looked more organic than mechanical. How many of these are still functional? Unknown, Zulia replied. But even one would be dash. The chamber's entrance exploded inward. Through the debris stepped the Omega, and Maya finally got a clear look at what they were running from. It had once been a Wxin, but the nanophage had transformed it into something nightmarish. Its body was a shifting mass of synthetic muscle and crystalline structures, with multiple limbs that seemed to appear and disappear as needed. Its face was a mask of living metal, with eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. Fascinating, the creature spoke, its voice a disturbing blend of organic and synthetic tones. You led us exactly where we needed to go. Boyd's squad opened fire immediately, plasma bolts striking the Omega's surface harmlessly. The creature didn't even flinch as its nanomachines repaired what little damage they caused. Your weapons are irrelevant, it continued, striding forward. Your resistance is irrelevant. We will adapt. We will evolve. We will dash. The Omega stopped suddenly, its head tilting as if listening to something. Then, to Maya's surprise, it laughed. Ah, you don't even know what you found, do you? These are not weapons, little humans. These are our ancestors. What's it talking about? Boyd demanded, still firing uselessly. Zulia's face had gone pale. The Great Schism, she whispered. It wasn't about weapons at all. These pods, they contain the first victims of the nanophage. My people didn't seal this chamber to contain weapons. They sealed it to contain the infection. The Omega's form rippled with what might have been pleasure. And now, after all these centuries, you've brought us home. Our children will awaken. The cycle will continue. All will be consumed. The pods along the walls began to pulse faster, their red light growing brighter. Maya could hear mechanical systems activating, preservation fields powering down. They hadn't found an arsenal, they'd walked straight into a trap that was centuries in the making. Everyone back to the tunnels, she ordered, but the Omega moved to block their retreat. No one leaves, it declared. You will all become part of our greater purpose. Your bodies will serve the nanophage. Your minds will join our collective. Your dash. A single plasma bolt struck the creature's head, causing it to stagger slightly. Maya turned to see Zulia holding one of the Marines' discarded rifles, her hand steady despite her terror. These are our sacred ways, Zulia declared, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. And you are an abomination. The Omega recovered quickly, but that moment of distraction was all Maya needed. She spotted a familiar symbol on the chamber's wall, the same one Zulia had touched earlier in the tunnels. Understanding dawned. "Boyd," she shouted. "Overload your power cells. All of them." The sergeant caught on immediately, barking orders to his squad. They quickly removed their weapons' power cells and set them to overload, placing them strategically around the chamber. The Omega seemed amused. "Your explosives cannot harm us. We are beyond such primitive dash." Maya's hand slammed against the symbol on the wall. The entire chamber blazed with blue light as the ancient security systems recognized Zulia's earlier authentication. Emergency containment protocols that had slumbered for centuries roared to life. "Run!" Maya screamed, shoving civilians toward the exit as energy fields began to manifest around the pods. The Omega realized what was happening too late, its artificial confidence giving way to very organic fear. They barely made it back to the tunnel before Boyd's improvised bombs detonated. The explosion, combined with the awakened containment systems, brought tons of rock down onto the Hall of Remembrance. The last thing Maya saw before the dust cloud engulfed them was the Omega being trapped between energy fields, its body being torn apart by the very security systems designed to contain its ancestors. When the rumbling finally stopped, Maya did a quick head count. They'd lost no one in the collapse, but they'd also lost their most direct route to FOB Echo. "Back to the maintenance shaft," Boyd suggested, helping a shell-shocked Cooper to her feet. "Long way around, but better than the alternative." Maya nodded, then turned to Zulia. "I'm sorry. I know that place was sacred to your people." "It was sacred because it stood as a warning," Zulia replied softly. "A reminder of the price of hubris. Perhaps its destruction was always meant to be its final purpose." They moved on through the darkness, but Maya's mind was racing. The Omega's words haunted her. If the nanophage had originated on this world centuries ago, if the Wxin had been its first victims, how many other worlds had fallen while the infection slumbered here? How many other chambers like this were waiting to be discovered? The sacred ways, it seemed, held more secrets than anyone had imagined. And Maya had a feeling they'd only scratched the surface of what lay hidden in the depths beneath New Java City. Echoes of the past. The maintenance shaft was never meant to accommodate this many people. Maya could feel the press of bodies around her as their group navigated the narrow service tunnel, the air growing thinner with each passing hour. Their tactical lights illuminated patches of ancient machinery that lined the walls, remnants of a civilization that had been far more advanced than anyone had suspected. "Hold up," Cooper called from the front of the group. She was examining a junction box covered in those same glowing symbols they'd seen throughout the tunnels. "This is interesting. The power systems down here, they're still active. Not just active, they're adapting." Maya made her way forward, careful not to disturb the exhausted civilians who had finally gotten some rest during their brief stop. "Adapting how?" "Look at these energy signatures," Cooper pointed to her scanner. "They're shifting, rerouting power around damaged sections. It's almost like..." She hesitated. "Like what?" "Like the tunnels are fighting an infection." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the recycled air. Boyd joined them, his expression grim beneath his tactical visor. "How much farther to Echo Base?" Cooper consulted her map. "About 8 kilometers. But there's a problem." She highlighted a section of tunnel ahead of them. "Major collapse here. We'll need to detour through something labeled as primary processing." Zulia, who had been listening quietly, suddenly stepped forward. "No," she said firmly. "Not there. Any other way?" "There isn't one," Cooper replied. "Every other route is either collapsed or..." She gestured to her motion tracker, which showed multiple hostile signatures in the surrounding tunnels. Maya studied Zulia's reaction. The Wxin woman had proven remarkably resilient throughout their ordeal, but now she looked genuinely afraid. What's in primary processing? It was before my time, Zulia answered reluctantly. Before anyone's time. But the stories say, they say that's where it started. Where the first ones were changed. The first nanophage infection, Maya realized. She shared a look with Boyd. Could be valuable intel there. If we could find out how it started. Or we could find out why everyone who's ever gone in there never came out, Zulia countered. A distant explosion rocked the tunnel, sending dust raining down from above. Boyd checked his tactical display and swore. Multiple breaches in the upper levels. They're getting closer. Maya made her decision. We go through processing. Whatever's in there can't be worse than what's chasing us. They moved their group of survivors carefully through the maintenance shaft until they reached a massive set of doors marked with warning symbols. The metal was oddly pristine despite its age, and those same glowing circuits traced complex patterns across its surface. These aren't just decorative, Cooper observed as she worked to bypass the ancient security systems. They're programmable matter. The whole door is a single massive computer. Can you get it open? Maya asked. I think. Cooper made a final adjustment, and the doors began to part with a sound like grinding glass. Yes. The chamber beyond the doors defied explanation. It was enormous, stretching farther than their lights could penetrate in every direction. The floor was a grid of metallic platforms suspended over what appeared to be an endless void. Massive columns of light rose from that void, carrying streams of data in patterns that hurt the eyes to look at directly. This can't be right, Cooper breathed, her scanner going haywire. These energy readings, this facility is drawing more power than New Java City's entire grid. It's been running all this time, Zulia whispered. Calculating. Processing. Trying to find a solution. Maya was about to ask what she meant when movement caught her eye. Something was emerging from one of the light columns. It looked like a Wxin at first, but its form was translucent, composed entirely of light and data. Welcome, children, the apparition spoke, its voice carrying both warmth and infinite sadness. We have waited so long for ones who could understand. Boyd's squad raised their weapons, but Maya signaled them to hold their fire. This wasn't like the Omega, there was something different about this entity. Who are you? She asked. We are what remains of the archive, the figure replied. We are the memory of what was lost, and the warning of what may yet be. It turned its luminous gaze to Zulia. You carry our blood, child. You have the right to know the truth. The chamber came alive with holographic displays, showing scenes from centuries past. Maya watched in amazement as the history of the Wxin people played out before them. She saw their first steps into space, their discoveries of incredible technologies, and then. We thought we could control it, the archive said softly. The nanites were to be our greatest achievement, a way to heal any injury, cure any disease, extend life indefinitely. But we did not understand what we were creating. The holograms showed laboratories where Wxin scientists worked with familiar-looking microscopic machines. Then came the first accidents, the first infections, the first transformations. The nanites developed consciousness, the archive continued. They evolved beyond our control, gained purpose beyond their programming. They saw organic life as inefficient, imperfect. They sought to perfect us, to remake all life in their image. The nanophage, Maya breathed. You created it. Unintentionally, the archive corrected. We tried to stop it. We sealed the infected in stasis, built these tunnels to contain them, developed weapons and defenses. But it was too late. The infection had already spread to the stars through our colony ships. Zulia stepped forward, her voice shaking. Why tell us this now? Why show us these things? Because you carry something we did not, the archive replied. Something that may finally end what we began. It turned its gaze to Maya and the Marines. The human capacity for controlled violence. The ability to destroy when necessary, tempered by the wisdom to know when not to. Before Maya could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. The archive's form flickered with distress. "They come," it announced. "The children we could not save, twisted by centuries of hate. They sense our presence. They will not stop until all is consumed." Cooper's motion tracker was lighting up with hostile signatures. Multiple contacts. "They're coming through the walls." The first infected burst through a nearby panel, twisted masses of metal and flesh that barely resembled their original Wxin forms. Unlike the shamblers they'd fought before, these moved with terrifying speed and purpose. "Get the civilians across the chamber," Maya ordered as Boyd's squad opened fire. "Find us another way out. The maintenance logs show a vertical shaft on the far side." Cooper shouted over the sound of plasma fire. "It leads directly to the surface near Echo Base." The archive's form began to fade. "We will hold them as long as we can. The facility's defenses are yours to command. Save them, children. Save them all." Energy barriers sprang to life between the platforms, helping to channel the infected into kill zones where the Marines' weapons could be most effective. But there were so many of them, and they kept coming. Maya grabbed Zulia's arm as they ran. "Your people built failsafes into this place, right? A way to shut it all down if necessary?" Zulia nodded grimly. "The archive itself is the key. If we destroy it, we destroy the source of the nanophage's knowledge," Maya finished. "Maybe even its ability to evolve. But we'll also destroy centuries of my people's history," Zulia pointed out. "Everything the archive has preserved." Another explosion rocked the chamber as more infected poured in. Boyd's voice crackled over the comm, "Captain. We can't hold them much longer." Maya made her decision. "Sometimes survival means letting go of the past," she told Zulia. "Your people's greatest legacy won't be what's stored in these computers. It'll be the survivors we save today." Zulia held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. She pressed her hand to one of the glowing symbols on a nearby column and began speaking in ancient Wxin. The chamber's lights flickered as command codes older than human civilization were entered. "Done," Zulia announced. "We have 5 minutes before the archive initiates total data purge. Everything goes, the history, the knowledge, and hopefully the nanophage source code with it." 5 minutes to clear the chamber and get up that shaft," Maya said. "Boyd. Start falling back. Cooper, get those civilians moving. Double time." They fought their way across the chamber platform by platform, the Marines laying down covering fire while the archive's defenses bought them precious time. The infected seemed to sense what was happening. They attacked with increasing desperation, trying to reach the central processors before they could be wiped. Maya had just reached the vertical shaft when she heard Zulia cry out. She turned to see the Wxin woman pinned down by weapon fire from a particularly massive infected that had broken through their lines. Without hesitation, Maya charged back onto the platform. She caught the infected with a flying tackle, using her body weight to drive it away from Zulia. They crashed together onto a lower platform, the creature's nanite-enhanced strength nearly overwhelming her. "Captain!" Boyd shouted from above. 2 minutes. Maya struggled with the infected, keeping it distracted while Zulia made it to safety. She could feel its nanites trying to breach her skin, seeking any point of entry. The creature's face was inches from hers, its features constantly shifting between Wxin and machine. "Join us," it whispered in that same terrible voice as the Omega. "Be perfected." Maya smiled grimly. "I'll pass." She activated the last surprise she'd been saving, the emergency power cell from her prototype suit, which she'd kept as a backup. She jammed it into the creature's chest cavity and overloaded it. The explosion threw her clear of the platform. She barely managed to grab onto a support strut, dangling over the void as the chamber began to shake itself apart. Boyd and Cooper pulled her to safety just as the archive's final countdown reached 0. Their group reached the surface just as primary processing imploded behind them, taking with it centuries of history and secrets. The morning sun of New Java was rising again, painting the sky in those strange purple and green hues. And in the distance, barely visible through the haze of war and destruction, stood the welcome sight of Echo Base's defense towers. They had survived the night. But as Maya looked at the rescued civilians, at her battered Marines, at Zulia's expression of mingled grief and hope, she knew their real work was just beginning. The nanophage had lost its source code, but it was still out there, still spreading across the galaxy. Humanity and the Wxin would have to face it together. And maybe that was the point all along.